Hey, it's Ruben Jay, and you are watching multimediamouth.com on YouTube. Today, we're going to be talking about Joe Rogan and his massive deal with Spotify to take his podcast to that platform. Before we jump into that, please be sure to thumbs up this video as it helps me out and also gives you some more content. So let's jump into it. Joe Rogan is probably the biggest YouTuber. I'm going to take that back. He is the biggest YouTuber, the biggest podcaster, the biggest comedian. He is probably the most well-known person on the face of Earth. And the reason why I'm saying that is because Joe Rogan, it was announced last week that Rogan has signed a multi-year deal with Spotify to take the Joe Rogan Experience podcast that has lived on YouTube for 13 years now, 10 years now. I'm not sure how long the show's been on the air exactly. And it's now being moved to Spotify. According to all the reports, the audio version and video version are both going to be broadcasted exclusively on Spotify. And to my knowledge, Spotify does not have a video platform currently available. So that means they're probably developing something for Rogan. So let's jump into some of the deals that some of the things that I know for sure about this deal. So starting September 1st, the Joe Rogan Experience is going to be available on Spotify. My understanding is it's going to be the entire library available on Spotify. So, and that's a lot of content. So if somebody who's really bored during lockdowns, if lockdowns are still in place at that point, you'll have plenty to listen to. The entire library will be available on Spotify September 1st. He'll also begin broadcasting his shows almost exclusively on Spotify starting September 1st, but it will still be available on YouTube and Apple. Come the end of the year, the broadcast will be removed from Apple completely. You will not be able to find anything Joe Rogan related as far as the Joe Rogan Experience available on Apple Podcasts or Google Podcasts for that matter. You will have to have a Spotify subscription to get your podcast in your podcast feed from Spotify. Now, let's talk about the downsides to that real quick. The downside to that is there are going to be millions of people who listen to Joe Rogan's show from Apple Podcasts who are not going to make the switch over to Spotify. I don't know if anybody who is a fan of Joe Rogan's who listens to him exclusively on Apple Podcasts is going to be willing to and I know this is kind of like one of those, like, what do you mean they're not going to be willing to download another app? I'm not sure if somebody's going to be willing to download another app, sign up for another service. Granted, it will be on part of the free package of Spotify, just to listen to Joe Rogan. Now, Spotify is an emerging market. They are developing more and more podcasts. I believe that this is the move, one of many moves that Spotify is going to be making. I do not think that this is like a one and done. I don't think that anyone's going to, I don't think Spotify is going to stop at Joe Rogan. They just happen to get the biggest fish possible. And Spotify, I will take a deal. It doesn't have to be worth this amount of money. It could literally be worth $5, and I'd probably take a deal. Anyway, I digress. So the big part of the deal is the video component. Joe Rogan probably gets a majority of his viewers and listeners from YouTube. That's how I found out about him. That's how many of my friends have found out about him. That's how many of my friends evangelize for him. It's like, hey, you need to watch this Joe Rogan clip. You need to watch Elon Musk on the Joe Rogan Experience. Here's the video. Here's the clip of the part that we love. Spotify is either making a play at YouTube long term, or they just really wanted Joe Rogan to be 100% exclusive to Spotify. So I think them getting the rights to the video podcast is actually a bigger play than we think. I would not be surprised if Spotify gets into the business of video content creation. Now, does that mean that Spotify themselves are going to be creating this video? Maybe, maybe not. Who knows? They may offer a great deal to current YouTubers who are unhappy with the YouTube platform, which there are a ton. There are a ton of creators on YouTube currently who are upset with the way YouTube handles things. I mean, everything from copyright claims to suppression of videos just because it's controversial, suppressing videos that are news-based videos because the content in the video does not necessarily line up 100% with YouTube's standards and practices. And me saying this puts this video in risk of being suppressed to the 20 people who watch this channel. So there are a lot of creators who, if Spotify said, hey, obviously we're not going to pay you $100 million, but we'll give you a nice cut of ad revenue and allow you to bring your own ads over and allow you to really build up your community, I wouldn't be surprised to see a couple of people jump over from YouTube into Spotify's video platform and create a video/podcast platform at Spotify. I'm calling it now. That's what I think the long-term play is. Why else would you spend $100 million bringing in the largest YouTube podcaster out there in Joe Rogan? You're spending $100 million. Yes, you'll bring in tons and tons of ad revenue dollars. You'll probably bring in tons and tons of subscription dollars. But this is a bigger play than just podcast. I'm telling you that. I am almost willing to guarantee you that. Now, there's another side of this too. Joe Rogan is probably one of the most controversial people out there ever. I mean, he's the same guy who will sit there and tell you why he would vote for Bernie Sanders, and then a couple of months later say why he's more likely to vote for Donald Trump. He's the same guy who came out a couple of years back and straight up said that Hillary Clinton was a terrible presidential candidate, and then also said that he hates Donald Trump. So he's not somebody who walks a political line, but he is somebody who wants to talk to everybody from every walk of life, no matter who or what they represent. He has come out and said on many times that he enjoys interviewing Alex Jones, whose name I probably shouldn't say. But there's been rumors and talk that Jones might actually be the first official guest on Joe Rogan's podcast once it's on Spotify. And that would normally get that video suppressed, demonetized, unable to be promoted, unable to be found, extremely difficult to be distributed via the YouTube machine. And Joe Rogan moving a show from YouTube to a platform who's probably like, you know what, Joe, do what you want to do. We want you to bring listeners to us. So we're not going to suppress what you have to say. We're not going to veto any guests, and we're not going to make your content any harder to find based off of who you bring on the platform. Well, Spotify has gotten rid of Jones as well as Apple and every other major tech company out there. So giving Rogan the autonomy to just say, hey, go out, book guests, do your thing, is a huge step forward. Now let's talk about this $100 million. A lot of people believe that what happened here is Spotify gave Joe Rogan a contract. Joe Rogan signed the contract, handed the contract back to Spotify, and Spotify handed him a $100 million check. It's not like that whatsoever. I haven't read the contract. I don't know anything about the contract, but I do know enough about the business of entertainment to know that if you get signed to a multi-million-dollar contract, you're not going to, first of all, you're not going to get the whole thing all at once. But second of all, that deal, that's probably what the contract is worth. There's probably a downside guarantee of a couple $1 million that Joe Rogan's going to for sure get. But the $100 million might also not just be compensation for Joe. Joe Rogan might be getting $20 million. Who knows? Still a lot of money. The other 80 million might go towards upgrading equipment, production cost, marketing costs. Maybe Joe Rogan wants to expand and create different podcasting programs on the platform or on different platforms. Who knows? There are many different things that $100 million could be used for. However, no matter what happens, this is a massive deal. This is the same. Howard Stern over at SiriusXM at one point, and I'm not sure if he still is, was making $100 million a year to host the Howard Stern show on Sirius. This is probably a much bigger deal than Stern signing to SiriusXM, but this is a massive, massive contract. So my hat, if I was wearing one, would be off for Joe Rogan. Now, there are a couple things to know as we wind this video down is, first of all, Joe Rogan does not work for Spotify. Joe Rogan's show is not owned by Spotify. Joe Rogan does not lose creative control. It's a licensing deal. It's an exclusive licensing deal. It's not like, when the Tonight Show hires a new host. This is this is if the Tonight Show was owned by Jimmy Fallon and CBS came and said, hey, we'll pay you to put the show on our network instead. This is what's happening here. Joe Rogan is not an employee. It's a licensing deal. He says the show will remain free. He's still in creative control of the show. All of that is a good thing for Joe Rogan. So great for Joe Rogan. Happy for Joe Rogan. I hope that this is a success for him and for anyone else who follows. I hope that people follow him over to Spotify because this is a massive deal. And it would suck for Spotify to put all their eggs in the Joe Rogan basket for it to fail. So let me know in the comments down below what you think about Joe Rogan's $100 million Spotify deal. Like this video, subscribe to Multimedia Mouth. Wow, that was weird. Subscribe to Multimedia Mouth on YouTube and share this video with a friend.